Hey YouTube, welcome back to a brand new video. Did you know Animal Crossing was almost not called Animal Crossing? It turns out in a recent interview with Leslie Swan, the lead Nintendo localizer tasked with localizing the original game to the West, we have been blessed with some super fun behind the scenes stuff almost 25 years later, which is crazy in itself. So today we're diving into the untold story of how Animal Crossing made it to the West, why it almost kept the forest in its title, and even how Mr. Resetti got his name. So if you're excited for some lost Animal Crossing lore, be sure to leave a like on the video as it helps out a bunch, and let's jump straight in. So as I'm sure you know, in Japan, Animal Crossing is called Dobutsu no Mori, which literally means animal forest, and is a really cute name in itself, and also where I got my channel name, FYI. Well, thanks to a recent interview with Time Extension, it seems the localization team really wanted to run with animal forest, keeping the forest part of the title when bringing the franchise over to the US, but after considering licensing and trademarks at the time and how this could affect future merchandising, Nintendo's legal department essentially shut it down. This then apparently led to months of brainstorming and testing hundreds of different names, and sadly, whilst we don't have a list of those names, which would be amazing to read through, Leslie did share her favourite and one of the strongest contenders, Animal Acres, and I quote, "It must have been at least 6 months or maybe a year for us to clear the name Animal Crossing. I remember we had so many other names that we were in love with, and then we would be crushed when they would be rejected. My favourite was Animal Acres because the grids of the town lent themselves to being called acres, but again, that didn't clear." Now, Animal Acres is also a really cute name actually, and the acres part of the original Animal Crossing is so nostalgic, but despite it being cute, it probably wouldn't have worked so well in modern games, because even though our New Horizons islands still technically have acres, which you can see on the map, the transition between them isn't obvious like it used to be. Anyway, they eventually landed on Animal Crossing, which just works. Presumably the crossing part comes from the crossing at the train station, but that's never been verified as far as I know. Either way, I can't really imagine the franchise being called anything different now. Animal Acres New Horizons just doesn't have the same ring to it. Now moving on to some more Animal Acres lore, even before they started localizing, producer Takashi Tezuka warned Leslie that translating and localizing Animal Forest was going to be one of the hardest projects ever, and when she told Nintendo leadership about bringing Animal Forest overseas, Satoru Iwata actually burst out laughing, and I quote, "So anyway, he basically said to me, we'd like to have you localize it, and I said sure, but then he said, no Leslie, I'm not sure you understand, it's going to be difficult, and I kept having to assure him that we would make it happen. Then like a month or two later, I was in a meeting with Mr. Iwata and some other heads in the department group, and we were just kind of going around saying, here's what we were going to be working on, and I just said, well, Mr. Tezuka is asking us to work on Animal Forest, and he just burst out laughing. He just laughed and said, I don't know how you're going to do this." And you can easily see his point. The original Animal Forest, which of course debuted on N64, then later came to GameCube, is heavily inspired by Japanese culture, tradition, myth, and lore. For example, many of the characters are inspired by Japanese mythology, many of the events were created based on Japanese specific holidays, and even some of the items and buildings, of course, inspired by Japanese culture. So naturally, they had to rename tons of items, furniture, villages, and even catchphrases. So it's not unreasonable to think of localizing the original Animal Crossing to an American audience would be a mammoth task. Leslie reiterated this in the interview, and I quote, "We had to go in and rename every character's catchphrase, and also the events. So what we would do is go through the list of events they sent over and say, that event's not going to work at all. We need to find something else that we can do during that month so that month wouldn't be just empty. So we wanted whatever it was to be something that would be useful in as many areas as possible, so we would do things like call it Fireworks Day or something, so other cultures, not just the US, would be able to use it without it being tied to Independence Day. Then there were also some items that didn't make sense at all. They would have so much charm in the Japanese version, but they wouldn't have provided the same kind of charm for Western audiences. I can't tell you the number of hours we spent on that game, all hands on deck. We were so lucky at that point that we didn't have other big projects, as we pretty much had the entire staff dedicated to that game. Anyway, I know we're jumping the gun here a little, but the localization team obviously did a good job because the final Western version was so good and features so much more content for the American audience. It was then translated back to Japan and re-released as E+, which is now widely regarded as the best version of the original generation. Have you played this version? Let me know in the comments. Now Leslie, who by the way wasn't just a localizer but a writer for Nintendo Power Magazine and eventually the voice actress behind Princess Peach in Super Mario 64, didn't just go on to localize Animal Crossing, but basically helped Nintendo invent their entire in-house localization team. Before this, a lot of translations were outsourced and the whole system was pretty messy, but after Animal Crossing and what then became Nintendo's Treehouse team became the gold standard for localization, making sure their games felt polished for fans all over the world. Again, I quote, "I was really passionate about what we were going to do with the localization team, but I was also perfectly happy working on the magazine. So when they asked me to move over and start the localization team, I said, okay, here's the deal. I will move over and start the new team, but only if you will let me set it up the way I want to." And that was having really proficient translators working together with really good creative writers. So what I did was, I convinced them to double the number of people involved by saying, in the long run, it's going to cut the localization time in half because the translator can be translating, but you can also have the creative writer in there working right behind them. Which is actually genius and honestly just helps games keep their local charm from being lost in translation whilst making it suitable and relatable to wider audiences. Now let's quickly talk about an example of one of the characters' names getting localized, specifically Mr. Resetti. In a second article relating to the interview with Time Extension, Leslie highlights how it's difficult to give any one member credit for various names and localization ideas, as the team essentially all bounce ideas off each other as ideas develop and grow, with very rare exceptions such as how Mr. Resetti came to be. Leslie confirms, and I quote, "I can't imagine the game by any other name now, but at the time I was like, we liked it. As for who came up with the name, I'm always very careful about giving any one person credit for this or that, because when you're sitting in a brainstorming session, everything somebody throws out, the next person builds on it. So whatever it ends up with, even though one person might have come up with that built on everything else and the other ideas that people had. So I try to never say that, other than in rare instances where it's really clear, like Tim O'Leary coming up with the name Mr. Resetti. Tim O'Leary was one of the translators who worked on the game. He came up with the name for Mr. Resetti, who's called Resetto-san in Japan, and I remember we were all just laughing our heads off at that one. So a nice little insight there to how also the translator both translated and localized Mr. Resetti's name, which was of course already inspired by the act of resetting a console, keeping its charm but making it relatable, and so the team ran with it just because they found it so funny. How cool is that? Let me know what you would call Mr. Resetti if Mr. Resetti wasn't his name. So all in all, after confirming localizing Animal Crossing was probably the most difficult project she's ever worked on, it seems we have a lot to thank Leslie for, and how her team were able to make Animal Crossing warm and inviting, engaging and relevant to Western audiences. If not for what became the Nintendo Treehouse, Animal Crossing may not be what it is today, or worse. it may have never left Japan at all. Of course, I'd like to thank both Leslie and Time Extension for sharing this interview. I've linked all the articles below. I definitely recommend checking them out to learn even more lore. If you made it to this point in the video, be sure to post acres in the comments just to let me know you did. That would be super awesome. And be sure to include your thoughts on the name Animal Acres. I'd love to know. If you want a breakdown of all the Animal Crossing news that dropped last week, be sure to check out this next video. Thanks for watching. Peace.